All right, last night I went to bed, and it was a different place. It's been that way for the last 3 weeks. The last 28 days, I've slept in my own bed 7 of those days. Actually, tonight is going to be the 7th day. We were on vacation, then we were here for a week, and that was the VBS week. I was trying to get caught up and get ahead. And this last week, I led a camp for older elementary and middle school kids up at Camp Fontenelle. It's one of the United Methodist camps up by Fremont. And a couple of years ago, God just kind of impressed on me that I'm going to devote a week of my life each year to working with the future. I don't know if it's little kids or middle school kids or high school kids, but it's just something that God has impressed on me to do. And then I went straight from that camp to Cub Scout camp, where Benjamin and I have been since Friday afternoon. And after I get done, I'm going back up there and I'm going to sweat some more. And last night it was great sleeping conditions. I don't know if the weather here was like it was in Fremont. It was 78 degrees, 158% humidity. Just laying on this wet sleeping bag. I had a towel. I was just wiping I think I fell asleep like around 3 o'clock. I woke up at 5:30 and made my way here. And if I fall asleep during the sermon now, you know why. And I got to go back up there after this. We're going to finish up the camp and bring him home. And I'm sleeping in my own bed tonight. And one of you can come up with a gift certificate to the Embassy Suites downtown, and I'm still sleeping in my own bed tonight because there's no place like home. And but what I wanted to mention too as well. I've been gone so much. The last week I haven't had any internet service, and that's been really cool, but it means I'm way behind in my emails, my phone calls, so hopefully I'm going to get caught up this week. And if there's something you got that I haven't responded to, just send me another email or give me a call, and we'll get things worked out this week. We're going to continue our series. This is called Identity Theft, and really, we talk about identity theft practically. Someone steals our information, our social security number, and they can totally mess us up, and we think that this is a terrible thing. And yet the world really steals the identities that God gives us, and we consider this to be totally normal and not a big deal. The first week, Brad Krebs, who was up here doing the announcements a little bit ago, he talked about what it meant to be God's masterpiece. Now, the world may say that we're a mess. The world may say that we're broken. The world may say that we're average, but God has a different word for us. God says that we are his masterpiece. Every time we look in the mirror, every time we talk to ourselves, we have to realize that we are looking at and we are talking to one of God's masterpieces. You are a unique creation. You're living a once to be lived, never to be repeated life. You are God's masterpiece. That is part of our identity. The next week I was back and I talked about what it meant to be an overcomer. Sometimes in life we'll say, we're a victim, we're overcome. Life is just a little bit too much, and we start to believe that our identity that God gives us as an overcomer has been stolen. Well, God says that you are an overcomer. Yeah, there's going to be challenges in life. There's going to be difficulties. Sometimes life isn't going to be quite as easy as we want it to be, but it doesn't matter because you're an overcomer. God says, I'm going to help you overcome. People are going to help you overcome. You are going to be an overcomer. Last week, Chad Shookman and the kids were in the auditorium, and Chad and the kids, they did a great job of talking about what it means to be an influencer. The world basically says we're influenced. Madison Avenue influences us. The television news influences us. Other people influences us. Now, they were saying, and they were talking about, God's identity, that we are an influencer. We are to be salt and light to the world. God has created us so that we're an influence. We're not here to be influenced by culture. We're here to take the gospel and to influence other people. And that is a wonderful gift that God gives to all of us. Now, today, what we're going to look at is the word disciple. God has created every single one of us in this room to be a disciple, a follower of Jesus Christ. Now, the world gives us another label. The world says that we're a Christian. And, the world doesn't talk about us being a disciple. The world says that we're a Christian. And what does that mean? What in the world does it mean to be a Christian? You go out in the street and you ask 100 different people, you're going to get 100 different answers. To some people, you say, what does a Christian mean? It says a Christian is someone who has been transformed by the power of God, who's someone who one day had an encounter with Jesus, and their life hasn't quite been the same since that day. The transformation has happened, that the old is gone, the new has come. Now, some other people, you may ask them what it means to be a Christian, and they may say something like, it means that you're an out-of-touch, deceived idiot, that you'll fall for these things that people have been falling for the last 2,000 years, and you're naive. Now, other people might say that Christians are very loving. They're very kind. They're very forgiving, and they're very generous. And we ask other people what Christians might be, and they might say legalistic, narrow-minded, judgmental. The world has a lot of definitions of what a Christian is and what a Christian is not. It might be what is it that we stand for? What is it as Christians that we stand for? That Christians are known by their love. We're known for our compassion, our faithfulness, and our integrity. That a Christian is one that practices and has all these things in their life. And other people may say, well, a Christian is someone that stands against something. We may stand against having fun in life. We don't smoke, we don't drink, we don't dance, we don't chew, and we don't even mess with the folk who do. And Christians, we may have a stand on homosexuality, or we may have a stand on abortion, or we may have a stand on the budget deficit debt cap limit, or whatever the thing is. And that we stand against things, or we stand for things. Now, here's the deal: Jesus never used the word Christian. You can read through the Gospel of Matthew through the end of the Gospel of John, and Jesus never once used the word Christian. Jesus never once asked people to be a Christian. What Jesus asked us to be was a disciple. The word Christian, it was actually given from people outside the church to people inside the church in the very, very early church. At this time, the church was very small, and the Jewish people gave these followers of Christ, they said, you're a Christian. And what that meant was, you're a little Christ. You're trying to be like this guy. You're trying to imitate him. And little did they know that was a compliment that they were giving to the Christians. But it wasn't a positive term. It was a negative term in the beginning that, oh yeah, you're one of those people who follows him. Now let's go to the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 9, verse 9. And here's Jesus, and he's calling out people to follow him. And let's start off with verse 9. As Jesus was going down the road, he saw Matthew sitting at his tax collection booth. Now, the Bible here gives us this additional information because it's important. Matthew was a tax collector. It's not like an IRS agent in today's culture. A tax collector was kind of a shyster. It was kind of a bully who worked for the government. And because you lived in a certain place, you had to pay a certain tax. And if you made a certain wage, you had to pay a certain tax on that. And if you owned other property, you had to pay tax on that. And the tax collector would, at a minimum, collect the money for the government and receive a wage from the government. But most likely, the tax collector was one who had a side income as well. He says, you need to pay the government this, and you need to pay the government this for this property you own. And I would also recommend, for your safety, that you throw in a little bit extra for me. So they would realize that when Jesus went up to Matthew, Matthew was not a good person. Matthew was a troublemaker. He was a bully. So then look what Jesus says next. He says to Matthew the bully, Matthew the tax collector, "Come, be my disciple," Jesus said to him. So Matthew got up and he followed him. Now, look at what Jesus didn't say to Matthew. Jesus didn't say to Matthew, "I want you to believe what I believe." Jesus didn't say to Matthew, "I want you to go to the temple, and I want you to worship every Sunday, and when you're there, I want you to give." That's not what he said. Jesus didn't say, I got these 10 rules, and Matthew, if you want to be like me, you're going to have to follow all these things. That's not what Jesus said. Jesus simply said, "Be my disciple. Follow me." Now, I look around this room right now, and I see some Matthews. Not that we're, evil people that try to extract money from everybody, or that we're terrible people, but we all know that, our past is somewhat tainted. And that doesn't matter to Jesus. Jesus doesn't look for our perfection and then ask us to follow him. Jesus meets us where we are and then asks us to be his disciple and to follow him. In fact, Jesus will use our brokenness. Jesus will use our past hurts, our past shortcomings to make us better in the future. There's not one of us in this room right now that is too bad and so bad that we can't take up Jesus' offer to follow him as his disciple. Now, the Greek word for disciple is actually derived from the word Matthew. It's, the Greek word for disciple is matheus. And what this word means, the Greek would understand this word as learner. They could understand it as pupil, but most likely they would understand it as someone who follows. Is someone who follows. So when Jesus asked Matthew to follow him, Jesus was basically saying this. He says, Matthew, I want you to live like I live. I want you to love like I love, and I want you to do like I do. I want you to just leave that tax collection stand right now, and I want you to follow me. I want you to come with me, and the two of us are going to change the world together. And that's exactly what they did. Now, Jesus, he makes that same invitation to us. We're Matthew sitting in our chair right now, and Jesus says, come and follow me. Come and be my disciple. Bring your brokenness, bring your hurts, bring your insecurities, bring your shortcomings. Come and follow me. He's not asking us to adhere to a rigid dogmatic belief system. Jesus isn't asking us to be part of an organization. What Jesus is inviting us to do is to become part of a movement. Jesus says, come and follow me. Be my disciple. Live as I live. Love as I love. Do as I do. We're not joining a church. We're joining a movement. And Jesus says, you get to follow me and be my disciple. So here's where the identity theft comes in. The culture says that we're Christians. Our identity as disciple has been stolen, and today we're going to reclaim that. Today we're going to pledge and we're going to commit that we are going to love like Jesus loved, that we're going to live like he lived, and we're going to do what he did. So who are we? Well, we're people that have encountered Jesus. We're people who have given up our old and are accepting the new. We're people who haven't necessarily arrived yet, but we are arriving. The old is gone and the new is coming. We are masterpieces. We are overcomers. We are influencers, and we are disciples. Regardless of what the world says, this is who God says we are, and we are reclaiming our identity. What we're going to do is we're going to live like Jesus lived and love like he loved and do as he did. Now, when we know who we are as overcomers, masterpieces, influencers, and disciples, when we know who we are and we know whose we are, we will know what to do. Now, the first thing that we do as a disciple, and remember, a disciple is a follower of Jesus. We do what he did and live like he lived and love like he loved. The first thing we do, and Jesus did this all the time, he says, as a disciple, we're going to find a need and we're going to meet it. We're going to look outside the walls of this building, into our communities, into our spheres of influence. We're going to find a need, and we're going to meet it. This is what Jesus did. The scribes were trying to trick Jesus, and they asked him what the most important commandment was, and Jesus says, and you've heard me talk about this a number of times, that we love God with all our heart and soul and mind and strength. And then Jesus says, and you love your neighbor like you love yourself. We're going to find a need and we're going to meet it. Now, Jesus continued and he clarified who a neighbor was. Jesus told a story and he said, there was a man that was walking along a road, and the road was from Jerusalem to Jericho. And the listener would have known that this wasn't a safe trip. This would have been a dangerous trip, especially in the evening hours, when it was dark outside. And the man ended up getting beat up. They not only took his possessions, but they took his dignity, and they left him there on the road to suffer. Now, Jesus talks about a priest that came next, and the priest saw the man laying on the road. Now, the man was laying on the road, and the priest just passed him by. Jesus said the priest saw the guy on the road, and he just walked right by him. It's kind of like me. The priest in this case would most likely be a pastor. It's kind of like when I woke up at 5:30 this morning in Fremont, and after I wiped all the sweat off my face and the bug spray and the grease and the grime and the dirt and the sulfur or whatever else was on me, I got in the car and I drove back home. And let's say when I was passing through one of those little towns like Utan or Meade or whatever those towns were in, and I saw a little boy on the side of the road. Understanding this is kind of like understanding that story. I just drive right by. I got to go lead a worship service. I don't have time to stop and help this kid. And then Jesus says the next person to pass by was a Levite. And the Levite wasn't necessarily the leader of the church, but the Levite was definitely a helper and an organizer in the church. And this would be like our guy, Larry, that drove the van or the trailer for the setup and tear down team this morning. He saw an elderly woman that was on the side of the road, and he said, I got to get this trailer to church. I don't have time to stop and help this woman who needs help. So at this point, who's going to stop and help this person? A Samaritan person comes around. We know the story as the Good Samaritan. Now, a Samaritan would be a despised, hated person to the Jew. It's kind of like this. If you're from Nebraska and you're a football fan, a Samaritan would be like a Texas Longhorn fan. You'd be really surprised if this person would stop and help. But Jesus picks up the story, and let's go to Luke chapter 10, verse 33. And we're going to conclude reading the story of the Good Samaritan here. Then the despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw the man, he felt deep pity. And look what he did. He went down, he kneeled beside him, the Bible says. And the Samaritan soothed the wounds with the medicine and bandaged them. Then he put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn, where he took care of him. The next day he handed the innkeeper 2 pieces of silver and told him to take care of the man. If the bill runs higher than that, he said, I'll pay the difference next time I'm here. Now, Jesus has told the story. Now he asks the guys a question. He says, now, which of these 3 would you say the neighbor was a neighbor to the man who was attacked by the bandits? Jesus asked. The man replied, the one who showed mercy. Then Jesus says, now go and do the same. Okay, I want you to hear those words. Now go and do the same. Love is blind. What we're going to do is we're going to find a need, and what we're going to do is we are going to meet it. Now, think about this. To be a disciple of Christ, we only have to do 3 things. We have to love like Jesus loved, live like he lived, and do what he did. Now, you're saying, okay, Craig, this is a story from 2,000 years ago. It applies to every one of us. And it's not about a person being stuck on the side of the road. All of us have people in our lives right now that are strangers who are stranded on the side of the road. It may be the boy who lives across the street from us. Maybe this boy's parents are busy, or maybe the boy lives with one parent, and the parent is doing the best that they can do, but this boy needs someone to play catch with him, and that is the boy that's stuck on the side of the road in your life. I see a number of students here, and kids, when you go back to school in a week and a half, there's going to be kids at your school that don't have a friend, and they need a friend. And that is the person that is stuck on the side of the road that you can do something about. It could be the elderly person, that she just can't get out. And she's the one that lives in the corner house, and you have a half hour where you can go sit and listen to her and talk to her and make her laugh and make her smile, and you'll pray for her before you go, and that's the person that you can help. We all have people that are on the road that we can stop and we can offer God's grace to. That's what Jesus did. Now, I believe that we don't stop by and help people on the side of the road, not because we are bad. I believe that we don't help and stop people on the side of the road because we're busy. We're busy with our priorities. Well, I want to challenge us to think that God's priorities are God's people, and hurting people, therefore, become our priority. Now, I want to give us some examples of how this works in our local congregation. We have volunteers in a small group that once a week go down to the Sienna Francis house, or once a month go down to the Sienna Francis house, and they feed hungry people. Later in August, it's the last Saturday of the month, there's a Miller Days Parade where there's literally thousands of people. And last year we handed out 3,000 bottles of cold water to hot people. You'll have a chance to do that. You wear a yellow shirt around and give water to thirsty people, and you make their day. We've had some people that have come up and said, let's do a clothing drive and get underwear and socks for school kids, or hats and mittens for people that are too cold in our own city. And we've done those things. We look for, there's a team of people that call our first-time guests and welcome them and see if they have any questions about our church. There's another 2 people that when I'm gone and out of town are just too busy, they'll go to the hospital and do some visits for me. We have 2 guys in our church that will go down and they'll partner with Release Ministries, and they'll do a Bible study on Friday afternoon to teenage boys that are recently out of jail or ones that are in jail right now. We have another group of people that go to the adult jails, and they'll do the Alpha course for both men and for women. Now, what these ordinary people are doing, these people are ordinary just like the rest of us. But when we mix an ordinary person and a great big God, we can have some extraordinary results, and that's what we see happening. Now I want to go to Matthew chapter 25, and we're going to read verses 35 through 36. This is near the end of Jesus' teaching, and it's near the end of his life as well. And listen to what Jesus says. For I was hungry. That's the people down at the Sienna Francis house, and you fed me. I was thirsty. That's all those people sitting along that parade route wishing they had some cold water. And you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, the first-time guest of the church, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick. That's the people in the hospital, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to see me. You know, there's needs out there that need to be met, and one of the things that disciples do is meet needs. Ordinary people plus an extraordinary God equals extraordinary results. Now, in addition to finding a need and meeting it, the next thing we do is find a hurt and heal it. Let's go to Matthew chapter 9, verse 35. Here Jesus says, Jesus went through all the cities. Actually, I'm reading from a different translation. Then Jesus made a circuit of all the towns and villages. He taught in their meeting places, reported kingdom news, and healed their diseased bodies, healed their bruised and hurt lives. Now, Jesus, let's tell the story of Peter. Peter was someone that had a self-destructive behavior. Peter was the one that was closest to Jesus. There was absolutely no one that was closer to Jesus than Peter. Anytime that Peter walked on water. He looked at Jesus. He got out of the boat and he walked across the water and met Jesus. Peter was the one that made it to the top of the mountain. Peter saw things that nobody else would saw. And near the end of Jesus' life, Jesus said to Peter, "Peter, you can deny me 3 times." And Peter says, "No, it's not going to happen." So they went up to Peter when Jesus was dying. They said, "You know that man, don't you?" And Peter goes, "No, never seen him before." The little girl says, "No, I saw you with the guy they're killing. You know him?" "Nope, don't know him. Must have been someone else." And someone else comes and says, "Hey, you're that guy's follower, aren't you?" And Peter goes, "No, it's not me." Now, as soon as Peter did that, he heard the rooster crow 3 times, just like Jesus said he would, and Peter's heart was broken. Peter hurt the person that he loved the most. Now, Jesus knew that Peter was hurting. And Jesus had every right to say to Peter, "You know, Peter, you disowned me. You denied me. I invested so much of my life with you. I invested so much time and so much energy, and this is what I get. Have a good life. We're going our separate ways." Peter made his own bed, and he was having to lay in it. But Jesus loved Peter. Jesus knew that Peter had a hurt, and he was going to heal it. What Jesus said to Peter was something like this: "I believe in you. You're my disciple. You're an overcomer. You're going to overcome this. You're a masterpiece. God is going to use you for something great. Now, Peter, go out there and feed my sheep." What he's basically telling them was, find a hurt and heal it. Now, this was back in 2002. There was a kid in my church. His name was Caleb. This was when I was a pastor in Northwest Iowa. And, Caleb had come to the youth group a few times. I actually kind of had to tell Caleb, he either needed to shape up or we just, didn't know if we could take him back because it was being really disruptive. And, Caleb had a negative reaction to that. And I didn't see him for months after that. And he had gotten kicked out of his house. He had went to live with some friends. He got kicked out of that house. His grandparents wouldn't let him stay there. He left to a different town. He came back, and one night, it was 8:30 on a Thursday night, I heard this knock on my glass window, and I looked outside, and I saw Caleb. I let him inside, and basically he said he's been living as a homeless person for 7 to 10 days, and he didn't have anywhere to go. I thought about it, and I prayed about it real quick, and I said, "Caleb, I want you to come with me." And we got home, and Benjamin was just a little guy at the time. Amber was there, and I said, "Caleb, this is my wife, Amber. Amber, this is your new roommate." easier to get forgiveness and permission, I guess. But God just placed on my heart, and I remember talking to Amber that night, and I said, Amber, if we don't help him, who will? We had some ground rules that were set up. The kid lived with us for a while. We got him back in the alternative school. We found him a job, and eventually he got off on his own 2 feet. But that question still rings in my mind today. If we don't help him, who will? That little boy across the street that just wants someone to read to him or play with him. If we don't help him, who will? That elderly person that sits alone in her house with no one to see her. If we don't help her, who will? The kid walking down the hallway that just hates to come to school because he doesn't have a friend. If we don't help him, who will? Jesus says in the Gospel of John, chapter 13, verses 34 and 35. So now I'm going to give you a new commandment, that you shall love each other just as I have loved you. You should love each other. We love as Jesus loves. For your love to one another will prove to the world that you are who? You are my disciples. Disciples love as Jesus loved. What we do is we find a need and we fill it. We find a hurt and we heal it. But there's one more thing that we do. We do a bunch of other things that Jesus asked us to do that won't fit neatly into one sentence. That's right, we do a bunch of things that Jesus asked us to do that won't neatly fit into one sentence. I want to go to the Gospel of John, chapter 10, verse 27. Here Jesus says, my sheep recognize my voice. I know them, and they will follow me. They will follow me. It's that same word, disciple. We will be a follower. Here's the deal. If we surrender our entire lives, and Jesus isn't interested in part of our life. He's not interested in Sunday morning from 10:15 to 11:45. He is interested Monday through Friday, all day long, and Saturday and Sunday too. But I'll tell you what, if we submit to Jesus and we say, I'm going to follow you. Wherever you lead me, you're my shepherd. I trust in you, and I guarantee you that you are in for the ride of your life. The fishermen, Jesus said, drop your nets, leave everything you have, and follow me. He said, don't sell the stuff on Craigslist and, put it all in a 401k, and if the thing with me doesn't work out, you got something to fall back on. Give me everything that you got. The woman, there was a widow. She hardly had any money, and she went up to the altar, and she gave Jesus everything that she had. It wasn't very much, but Jesus says, this woman is blessed because she has given me everything. In our church, we have 2 missionaries. Actually, there's 5 missionaries. Jay and Susan Monday, and Jay was a member at Faith Westwood back in the middle part of the 2000s. And Jay was an Air Force pilot. He had gotten out of the Air Force, and he was doing some private flying lessons and going around and fixing some airplanes and doing this and that. And one day God said, Jay, I want you to follow me, and I'm going to lead you to Kenya. And when you're in Kenya, you're going to fly airplanes all over Africa, and you're going to deliver missionaries all over the world. Jay went home and told his wife, Susan, this great plan that God had, and she laughed. She said, that's crazy. And Jay came back and said, this thing's not going away. So Jay and Susan and their 3 kids now live in Kenya, and they fly missionaries all over Africa. They did something that's not going to fit up on a little screen and sound all neat because they listened to God's voice and they followed. Now, here's the deal. Most of us aren't going to leave our families, our homes, and we don't even have the skills if we could fly people all throughout Africa, but we can do things right here in our local community. Remember that question, if we don't help this person, who will? About 7 or 8 years ago, there's a woman at Faith Westwood that had a vision to start a worship service at a nursing home. And what she does, still to this day, on the first Friday of every month, it's at the Good Samaritan Nursing Home, about 132nd and Q Street or so. She goes and she sets up the communion stuff. And someone else said, this is kind of cool. I'm going to go and I'm going to play the piano so the residents can sing. And someone else said, well, I can lead the singing. I like to do that. It sounds cool, and I'll bring my kids. And there's another person that comes and helps. And when I got here 6 years ago, Benjamin and I, we started going to this worship service. And, I was just thinking this morning when I was kind of thinking about what I was going to say. I was thinking of I was thinking of the thousands of people over those 6 years from that monthly worship service that have experienced God's grace. They can't carry the tune. They can't hear the words the pastor says. But when I say the Lord's Prayer, they all perk up and they say those words together. When I take that little piece of bread and dip it in the juice and put it in their mouth, they can't even do it with their own hands. They are experiencing God's grace. Now here's the deal. And afterward, the kids afterward take the residents and they push them back to the place where they eat or to the rooms, and I think that's what the residents need almost as much as anything. This was a vision from an ordinary person, helped with a team of a bunch of ordinary people, with a really big God doing something extraordinary. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to others when Jesus asks us to do things, and that's okay, because we're not here to please other people. If we try to base our life on pleasing other people, we're going to be disappointed 100% of the time, because we're trying to please an imperfect person, and that is impossible. So what we try to do is we try to please God. And I can guarantee you that when we start pleasing God with our life, we will fall into incredibly great favor with people, because they will admire us because we are disciples of Jesus Christ, and we love like he loved, we live like he lived, and we do what he did. Now I want to challenge you this week to just intentionally, radically try to live as a disciple of Jesus Christ wherever we are. For those of us who have jobs and we work in offices, I want you to be a disciple right there. For those of us in families and in our homes, I want us to be a disciple in that context. I want us to ask that. I want to challenge you to ask that question. Who is that person on the side of the road that God is asking me to heal that hurt and to meet that need? And I want you to ask that question: if I don't do this, who is going to? And I want us to find ourselves in situations where we're meeting needs, and we're healing hurts, and we're jumping out of the box, and we're doing things that we never ever thought we would do, and we're doing it in Jesus' name because we're a follower of him. So let us go to God and let us pray.